Hi, this is Stuart Weems, and thanks for listening to the Investopoly podcast. My goal is to give you simple, easy to understand insights, strategies and tips to help you master the game of building wealth. In this episode, I'd like to talk about private school fees. Private school fees are very expensive naturally, and they can have a big impact on your cash flow, but from a financial perspective, what's the long-term impact? Let me first say that I'm not making a judgment on private school fees. I can only talk about the financial considerations. Of course, there's lots of considerations that you need to take into account, and for some people, private school education is extremely important, and that trumps any financial outcome. So let's put that aside for a minute and let's just talk about the finances. So if private school costs, let's say $25,000 a year, and you educate your child for 6 years, let's say you're sending them to secondary school, obviously that's a cash flow cost of $150,000. That's $150,000 after tax, so you've probably got to earn somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 pre-tax to pay for those school fees. But what is really the opportunity cost? Because you could do other things with those monies. So let's look at a home loan. If you had a home loan of $500,000, and instead of sending your kid to private school, you put $25,000 per year for 6 years in a row into your home loan, the compounding impact of the interest saving works out to be over $400,000, $426,000 to be exact. So together with the actual private school fees, you're down about $576,000 to be exact. So $500,000 is really the opportunity cost of private school fees. But let's take it even one step further. Instead of repaying the home loan, let's be a little bit more aggressive and say invest in property. So if we buy a $550,000 investment grade property, which you can do in Melbourne, and for the next 6 years contribute $25,000 a year towards that investment. So obviously that will more than pay for the negative cash flow, so the shortfall, but also put some money in the offset account. And then after 6 years, we don't put one more cent towards that property. Well, I worked out in today's dollars, in 20 years' time, you'll have over $1 million worth of equity in that property, in today's dollars, not in future dollars. So again, that's more than 5 times the actual cash flow cost of the school fees. Pretty significant, hey? So obviously, if you've got more than one child and or you're going to send them to primary school and secondary school, well, then you can double that or triple that or quadruple that cost. So what's an alternative? Well, another alternative is to instead buy a house in a school zone of a public school that it has a very good reputation. So perhaps you could achieve similar education standards going to a really well-regarded public school as opposed to wearing the private school fees. Now, of course, properties in those locations tend to cost more, so you've got to consider that. There's 4 items that you need to consider. The transactional costs of doing that, you've got to sell, there's selling costs, then you've got to buy or rebuy, there's stamp duty associated with doing that. You've got to think about the cap growth differential. So how will that property grow compared to the property that you currently own? You've got to think about the property value differential. So, if you have to spend a lot more to get into that area, that means that you'll have to borrow a lot more and you'll have a higher non-deductible amount of debt. So you need to consider that. And the 4th consideration is how many kids do you have? Because obviously if you have one child, then the differential might not be that significant to warrant it. But if you've got 4 children, for example, then obviously there's a greater saving and it makes even more benefit to move into a good public school area. So there's a bit of food for thought, really. I just wanted to sort of throw the cat among the pigeons when it comes to private school education, and perhaps what you might then consider is we'll go public for primary, which a lot of people do, and then go private for secondary education. Try and balance out the pros and cons of giving your kids a really good education versus looking after your own financial affairs. If you'd like more information, check out the link in the show notes for this podcast. Otherwise, that's all for me. Bye for now.